Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to the Refined Savage podcast. Hey guys, we are back. We are back to 2 episodes a week. We are working hard for you. We are dealing with the last, hopefully, of our microphone issues. This podcast is great. You're going to hear a lot of good information. We're still dealing with a little bit of microphone issues there, but this is it. This is the last time anyone's going to bitch at me for having poor microphone quality. So you got to realize you have 2 meatheads running this podcast, and we're doing the goddamn best we can. We think we figured it out, and we have some fantastic podcasts in the future lined up, already recorded. This is a fantastic one as well, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Let's talk a little business right now. The beard struggle. You guys with those big, giant mountain man beards, you got to keep those things looking and smelling fresh. You can't have food in there. You can't have them looking all nappy looking. You got to get them checked out and taken care of. Beard struggle. The beard struggle has everything you need from beard combs and flatteners and straighteners to beard balms and oils, and you want to give them a holler. Thebeardstruggle.com. Use the code REFINEDSAVAGE at checkout for 15% off. Impact mouth guards. Are you one of these teeth grinders who are driving your mate nuts at night because you are grinding them molars down to nothing? Impact mouth guards can help you. Or are you in a combat sport? If you're in a combat sport where you might get your choppers knocked out of your face or get some traumatic head injuries, or if you're just a lifter who wants more pounds on the bar, Impact Mouth Guards is the way to go. Check them out at impactmouthguards.com. Use the code capital REFINE, capital SAVAGE for 15% off. Stay Classy Meats, the best in the business. They are taking meat, boxing it up, and shipping it to your house. You don't even have to leave the fucking house, and meat just shows up at your door. What else could you want? Humanely processed, humanely raised. These animals live a beautiful life up in Bozeman, Montana. They're drinking from fresh Montana streams and eating fresh Montana grass. And they taste wonderful. I can't say enough about them. I am especially fond of their bison. Great stuff. Check them out at stayclassymeats.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. The folks at Serious Steel want you to know that they have everything you could possibly need for your home or commercial gym, or if you just need some stuff like, hand grippers and things like that. I love their hand gripper. I've got one sitting right by my desk. You guys have seen it in some pictures, I'm sure. And I use that thing all the time. SeriousSteel.com. Use the code SAVAGE at checkout for 10% off. They will take care of you and for way less than everybody else. Warrior CBD. Some people are being put off by CBD oil because they think it doesn't work. And I'm telling you, if you're getting your CBD oil from a gas station or a grocery store or anywhere here in friggin' Ohio or some other company that's not the best, it's not going to work for you. It's just like you're one of these hippies rubbing essential oils on you. It's not going to do anything. Nancy at Warrior CBD will help you. Get a hold of her on Instagram if you have any questions at Warrior CBD, or just go to warriorcbdofficial.com and order it up. I love the sublingual drops, 2,000 milligrams, awesome stuff. Check them out. Warrior 20 off at checkout for 20% off. Cerberus Strength. Cerberus, the leader in strongman competitors. They have more guys sponsored by Cerberus than anywhere around, and their Instagram is filled with nothing but people using Cerberus equipment. If you are in Highland Games, if you are in strongman, if you are in powerlifting, you got to check out Cerberus Strength. Great equipment, and they are knee deep in the sport. These guys are athletes. They're not just people trying to make a profit. They are competing, and they're doing a great job at it. And their company is kick-ass, so I don't know why you'd be buying from somebody else. Check out Cerberus-strength.us and use the code REFINEDSAVAGE10 at checkout for 10% off. Finally today, my brother, my best buddy, Evan Armstrong up there in Bowling Green, Ohio. He is brewing up the best coffee in the land. Just the best, man. Check out Old Man Strength Coffee. Check out this Ethiopian blend. He's just got some great blends on there. Check him out. VikingCoffeeCo.com. Use the code VikingCoffee10 at checkout for 10% off. Today on the show, So here's the deal with this. My wife tells me she's in a training at her job. I'm not going to say where because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to or not. But she's at her training at her job, and she says this guy's giving the training, and he's awesome, and he's a former helicopter pilot, and I should get him on the show. And I said, well, what division was he with? And she tells me, and I immediately recognized it as the Night Stalkers. So for those of you who don't know about the Night Stalkers, you're going to find out all about them in this podcast, but they are basically the Delta Force of helicopter pilots. These motherfuckers are doing it, and they are absolute savages, and you want to listen to this podcast because Ryan is he's a certified motherfucking badass, and I think you're going to love the podcast and love what he had to say, and he will for sure be on again. Like I said earlier, audio is a little sketchy on my end. So I sound like I'm in a tunnel somewhere. Ryan sounds clear as a bell, and he talks for most of the show, which is what I wanted him to do anyhow, because the guy's got stories and he's got life lessons, and he's just one of my new favorite people, and I think you're going to love this podcast. So share it. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell anybody who'll listen. And enjoy. We'll see you at the end, brothers and sisters. All right, Ryan, welcome to the show.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
A little bit of a Northeast Ohio winter drive you had this morning, a little bit?
Yeah, not too bad. Like I said, we're way out on the east side, so it's if you got an inch or two of snow here, we've probably got triple or double at a minimum of that. So yeah,
we've gotten so lucky this year as it is. We're heading down to the Caribbean next weekend, but it's we've been what this could end up being every winter. We've been spared so far, really.
Yeah, it's been pretty mild. I know last winter was our first winter up here since moving up here after I retired, and it was pretty cold. It's pretty brutal.
Where are you originally from?
I actually grew up in Southern California originally. Yeah.
So how did you end up here?
Well, married an Ohio girl,
okay.
So the rest kind of sorts itself out. But I grew up in Los Angeles County, so people say, okay, well, hey, you grew up in Los Angeles. What was it like living in the city? And I actually grew up, I don't know how familiar you are with the area, but just north of Los Angeles.
Okay.
So in the county, but if you went kind of north and then up into the mountains, going into the high desert area, grew up in a small horse ranch off of a dirt road, water, stuff like that.
People don't realize that's a lot of California.
Oh yeah. California could easily be divided into 3 states, so it's such a massive state. But grew up out there. My dad was in the oil refinery business for a while. He did that, and then they got bought out by a larger company down in San Pedro, where all the big terminal is by Long Beach, and had to change careers in his mid-30s, so he became a cop. So he was a City of Los Angeles police officer for 26 years. So, but my parents are originally from Burbank, California. That's where all the studios are out there, and that's kind of, they went to the 2 high schools there, and then they decided after they got married in 1976 to move out to the country, because my dad had always been into like horses and motorcycles, like dirt bikes and stuff, and my grandmother, who passed away in the early 90s, was into horses too. So they decided to move out of the city and get into some areas where they could go have horse property. So it's kind of when I did the session with our nursing staff at the VA, I showed some pictures of the area, but I remember as a kid growing up, less than a mile from my parents' front porch was an active gold mine. So this little town actually was Acton, California. You've probably seen a lot of it in movies because they do a lot of filming there.
Okay.
In the movie Army of Darkness.
Yeah.
Remember the castle? Yeah. The castle, that was actually about 5 minutes from my parents' house. They did a lot of filming just because of the mountainous area that it was in. But
like a different world.
Yeah. So yes, grew up in Southern California, but not anywhere near the beach.
Right.
And
you're not surfing or anything like that.
Going to the beach was at least an hour or more with traffic, so it wasn't too convenient. But just a really small town that actually had a building code where any commercial properties had to have a Wild West like motif to it. So I remember the big thing was we got a McDonald's there when I was a kid. This is 80s and 90s, and it had to look like it was part of the Wild West. So they put a water tower up, and it looked like something out of a movie. But that's where I grew up. My dad was a cop, motorcycle cop for the city of LA, and my mom was in real estate for a while. But for the most part, my dad worked, and my younger brother and I were more or less raised by my grandmother until she passed away. Because they were always out working. But Yeah, didn't have the traditional, palm tree beach.
It's funny because before we moved out here, we had our gym in a little town called Amherst, which you pass through on
Yeah.
the way here, and we wanted to build a new gym, and
Hmm.
we said, well, we're just going to put this big building up, and that's the same thing. They
Oh yeah.
wanted it to be, look like, because Amherst is this old-fashioned town. They
Oh
wanted
yeah.
it to look like, it was built in the 1900s.
Oh yeah.
That just added like $8 million to the
Oh, it's
bill.
ridiculous.
I don't think we're doing that.
Yeah, and I haven't been back to my hometown. The last time I was out there, God, it was probably 2004, 2005, because that was about the point to where I went into the 160th, and
Yeah.
Time off was a commodity. We normally came up here because my wife is from the west side, so her parents both passed away a few years ago, separately. They were separated, but my wife grew up on the west side, so being stationed 8 hours south of here, about 500 miles, 8 hours drive. Any opportunity we could get to come up here, it was more convenient to do that than to pay the money to fly. And my schedule was so erratic. But Cleveland wasn't completely foreign to me when we moved up here in 2018 when I retired. And as a kid growing up in Southern California, it was a great place to grow up. But I wanted to move on and do other things. Talk about the military experience here in a minute.
Yeah.
But this place, being an outsider moving into Northeast Ohio, it really is a special place. I mean, there's some great stuff up here, great people, and I really, 2004, 2005, we got married in 2004. The area really grew on me. Probably back to 2003 when I first set foot up here, before we got married, before I deployed to Iraq. But there was just something special up here. Gave me an experience I never had growing up in Southern California, and just it's a very diverse area. My wife's half Sicilian, half Croatian, so traditional, Italian, Catholic Italian family, kind of had.
Sicilians.
She warned me, before I first met her family. She's like, yeah, we're kind of like, it's big fat Greek wedding, so just go with it, and I'll tell you, I really grew to love my mother-in-law and my wife's family and her sisters and brother-in-laws. It's just a great area, and it made sense for us to come back up here.
Yeah.
So this area converted me into a believer, and really just enjoy being up here. And the people really are really nice up here, I think.
Yeah. And tough. And
it's kind of a blend of like Midwest values, East Coast. I'll still argue, as an outsider not raised up here, that Cleveland is probably the westernmost East Coast city, and not truly a Midwest town. It does have kind of a blend of different elements, but
there's a difference between Cleveland and, say, like the Quad Cities.
From well, even Chicago too. My sister-in-law lives in Chicago now. And that's a massive city, but it's very different out here. Having been to Boston and New York, Philadelphia myself, on trips and experiencing those cities, Cleveland has more of that vibe. I think it's kind of a pass-through city on the way to maybe Chicago,
right?
And it's still an area that really values the ethnic diversity and these different enclaves of creation and it's Slavic, you name it. It's a very diverse area that still is very true to its roots. I mean, I enjoy it up here, and we haven't even broached the arts and culture and everything else that the city offers too.
It's amazing, and Aaron and I don't spend enough time getting out there because we're just busy. But the art museum is incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean the hospital's right next to it, and that's one of the best in the country. It's beautiful.
We go over to the Natural History Museum. I had Michelle Leidy on the show who runs their nature that I didn't even know they had. They had they've rescued coyotes and birds of prey back there.
Yeah, it's great museums. I mean, that whole Wade Oval area is phenomenal. Plus, you get Severance Hall, and
Severance Hall is beautiful.
Yeah, so we try to get every once in a while and just go take in some of those activities. I mean, there's really no shortage of things to do up here, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just a matter of finding the time to do it. Right?
Yeah. So it's but it's fun. But yeah, my journey to Cleveland started when I came in the Army in 1998.
So let's talk about that. Did you? When you went into the Army, were you wanting to fly helicopters, or was it the other? Did you start in the Army and then what?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I still remember this one moment in growing up in Southern California. We always had. Well, let me back up a little bit. I was probably a junior, senior in high school. I went to a really small, terrible high school. I was with the same kids pretty much from kindergarten all the way through through high school. I had about 70 kids 70 or 80 kids that actually graduated, but I was with the same people. And the whole school situation out there was a mess. There was no convenient options, anything else, that was an option was 20 or 30 minutes away. So, they created this little local high school that was actually on a shared campus with a middle school. And we just had terrible resourcing. So, I got into sports about halfway through high school, and, just I decided to get back into the sports and played like volleyball and soccer. We had a football team, but it wasn't so great. So I'm like, I'll try some of the more obscure sports. And,
Sure, yeah.
I grew up playing soccer most of my life anyway, so that kind of came naturally to me, but played volleyball for a little bit too. And that was a lot of fun, but wasn't really prepared academically for, college. Kind of wanted to try to pursue some sports scholarships, but, this is back in 1998, internet's kind of,
Right, yeah.
growing right now, so you couldn't just fire off an email to somebody normally. So, sent some letters out, Cal State Northridge, a couple other schools, but I'd already graduated and was working as a lifeguard at Six Flags and did that. And as a summer job, it wasn't bad, but, it was at that point, my parents were like, hey, so what are you going to do? I'm like, well, this college thing isn't working out. And, teachers didn't really hold me accountable. My parents, more or less did, weren't super invested in the stuff that mattered with school. It's not a big deal, but decided, you know what, if the college thing doesn't work out, the military is always out there. And I kind of got to the point, and it may sound cliche, but you know what, I want to go out and just see what's out there and do something different. Yeah. And quite honestly, that decision was probably the best decision I made. In hindsight, looking back, I wouldn't have done it any other way. And had a neighbor behind us, and I don't know if the guy's story was ever true. Looking back, maybe his story was a little falsified, but he claimed to have been, when he was enlisted, he's like, oh, I was in 2nd Ranger Battalion. Here's a Ranger handbook. So he had the material. So whether or not he was, it doesn't matter. But I remember the guy gave me that when I was, kind of talking about the Army, and I had a friend in high school that had actually signed up for an Army Airborne Ranger contract, which was an option. It's still an option. So essentially, you enlist to be an infantryman. If you make it through boot camp as an infantryman in the Army, then you can go to jump school, and, get your airborne wings. If you finish that, then you had to fall on to what was called the Ranger Indoctrination program, which is now it's called RASP. It's a much more in-depth program, but at the time it was called RIP, Ranger Indoctrination Program. And if you made it through that, then you got assigned to one of the 3 Ranger battalions. And then you could go through pre-Ranger, go to Ranger school, and then go back. So, I decided that friend of mine had that kind of contract. And, I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I might as well, just go down that path. And I remember going to the recruiters and saying, hey, do you guys have like airborne medics? And they're like, no. I'm like, you go be a helicopter crew chief. I'm like, didn't really want to do that. So I decided to go do the Army Ranger contract. Now, going back to the question about flying, I remember in high school, brush fires were always a problem in California, and we had the county fire department. Was always fighting fires, and it wasn't uncommon for us to see the sheriff's department or the county fire department always flying, like putting out fires. And I remember driving past where they had like a fuel area set up for the helicopter, a refueling point, so they can go fight fires. And I remember driving past that with my mom and seeing the helicopters land. And I remember saying to her, that'd be cool someday if I could ever do that. Never, thinking that I actually was, smart enough or had the capacity to do it. And, couldn't imagine fast forwarding, 4 or 5 years and actually being in the position to do it. But yeah,
you're driving in a car with your mom, and 5 years later you're flying.
Yeah, so it was cool. But, I started off enlisted in the Army, and quite honestly, that being in Ranger Regiment, the 75th Ranger Regiment, was probably what really set me up for success, just because it's such a great organization, and they hold you so accountable, and I still think arguably it's probably one of the best institutions in the military. It's just highly regarded. You can go in there young. It's it's definitely like a fraternity, and you have a lot of responsibility, but 19 or 20 years old, was done with Ranger School and was stationed up at Fort Lewis, Washington, in Alpha Company, 2nd Ranger Battalion. And it wasn't always easy for me, but it was fun, and I really enjoyed that, and was not convinced that I was going to stay in the Army. So I did that for a few years, and mind you, this was 1999 till 2002 that I was there. So a significant event happened while I was up there, but it was fun. I mean, I went to Ranger School and graduated in May of 2000. So had been in the Army not even 2 years, was already a specialist with a Ranger tab, jump wings, EIB, and all this other cool stuff.
Because people go through Ranger School all the time. They don't get the Ranger
School. Yeah. So I mean, people go through Ranger School.
They sent
Yeah,
SEALs through there.
yeah. Ranger School is not a part of 75th Ranger Regiment. I mean, the Army's Ranger School is more of a leadership course, for 62 days or whatever. So it's a lot of different MOSs, different jobs, different services. I remember we had Marines, going through our course too. There was an Air Force, Ranger instructor I remember in Florida phase. So yeah, that Ranger School is not directly associated with the 75th Ranger Regiment. The 75th Ranger Regiment is an element of United States Special Operations Command and Joint Special Operations Command and USASOC. But I always compare Ranger Regiment to kind of the shock troops that go out and if you want to correlate it to Star Wars, they're the death troopers that just go out and get business done. But it was a great place to grow up, and I really enjoyed it. It tested me, and when I talked to the nursing staff of the VA, I was learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I always think that if you're in a vocation where you're uncomfortable, you're learning, you're growing, and I certainly was that whole time because I was exposed to so much at such a young age that it definitely took me away from growing up in a small town in Southern California on a horse ranch,
Right.
to being able to travel all over the place. And we did a deployment to Korea for an exercise in 2000, and things are going well. And the summer of 2001, I was beginning to enter my window. I came in on a 4-year, 17-week contract initially, and was approaching the 3-year mark, and that's about when the recruiters and the retention, sergeant comes to you. Hey, so what do you want to do? Do you want to re-enlist? We got some bonuses, or we can send you to school. And this was July of 2001, and I actually said, I'm going to try to go to flight school. The Army has a program where you can go be a warrant officer, and you've got enlisted, and then you've got warrant officers and then commissioned officers. Well, warrant officers, in the Army make up most of the aviation community with respect to pilots. So I viewed that as my opportunity to go fulfill, a dream to go fly and stay in. Because I'd been cross-trained as an EMT and was considering maybe re-enlisting and changing my MOS to be like a special operations medic or go to some other, tiered units that are above them that require selections. But decided to prep myself to submit a flight packet. And I did that the whole entire summer of 2001. And I think it was September 9th of 2001, got an acceptance letter to go to flight school. And then I remember waking up the morning of September 11th. And mind you, we were on West Coast time up in Fort Lewis is right there, next to McChord Air Force Base near Tacoma, Washington, in between Tacoma and Olympia, so up there near Seattle. And remember people knocking on my door. I'm trying to remember if September 11th was on a weekend or not. But
it was a Tuesday.
Was it a Tuesday? I think it was a Tuesday, so I had to look that up. But either way, we were woken up really early in the morning. Based on the time that it happened, and flipped the TV on and was starting to take in everything that was going on. And mind you, when I came in the Army, we were still kind of winding down from the conflict in the Balkans with the collapse of Yugoslavia, former Yugoslavia. So that was kind of our training model. And then we, when I was in Ranger Regiment, we kind of evolved more into the urban warfare, close quarters. We were doing a lot of that, that type of shooting and training. A lot of work with the 160th flying in their helicopters, and you've got pictures standing in front of helicopters that would eventually go on to fly down the road.
Yeah.
But yeah, September 11th happened, and just remember that vividly. I think everybody does, and stuff happened pretty shortly after that involved the future organization that I would serve with. Going over there pretty early on, a few weeks later, and then one of our sister battalions, 3rd Ranger Battalion. That also had served in Mogadishu with the whole Black Hawk Down incident, got the call to go first, and they jumped in. If anybody remembers those kind of iconic night vision scenes on CNN or whatever of Rangers parachuting into southern Afghanistan, and I fully expected, okay, well, hey, we're going to go do this first, and then maybe I'll get to that flight school thing, even though I was already accepted and I had a January start date. So we waited, and things just kind of came and went, and we never got the call while I was there. So, I wouldn't say that there was any regret with leaving my team, but I really, for a period of time there when I left in early 2002 to go to Fort Rucker, Alabama to start the warrant officer program, go to flight school, I was really concerned about the guys that I had been raised with. I had some really good friends and people I still talk to this day Would later in 2002 go on to serve in Afghanistan, post 9/11. While I was down at flight school, and made it, have eventually come to terms with my, any sense of remorse or regret I had, because some of my friends that I grew up with were killed, that were in 2nd Ranger Battalion, and the other Ranger battalions too. But not at that point, I was not realizing that I would get myself into the 160th and would have my fair share of experience.
It was going to be a long war.
Oh yeah, to this day.
You guys thought that this was going to be over quick and you were going to miss your chance.
Yeah, it's still mind-boggling that here we are today in 2020, coming up on 19 years or so in a conflict, which is unfathomable if you think about it. So
yeah, we had Ryan Jasinski in here from SEAL Team 10 a couple months back, and I said, the war was won in a matter of weeks, and but we're still there. We're still in operations. We're still doing things, and there's no end in sight. Yeah,
it's just a multi-dimensional, layered challenge that we could probably spend weeks trying to talk about and share perspective on. But yeah, it's it is what it is. It happened, and we reacted, and 10 years or so later, we would go after the figurehead and do that. But it's still crazy to think about it, because most of the guys that I was raised with in the 160th are still out there doing it. Some have retired, but I've got some really good friends still out there doing it. And I went through flight school 2002, 2003. Beginning of 2003 was winding down. Got tracked UH-60 Blackhawks out of flight school initially. You pick your airframe that you're going to fly. So I got that, and they go through academically. So I did pretty well academically in flight school, actually. Finished close, pretty high up, in the class academically. So I had a little bit of leverage in the duty station I wanted to pick. Mm-hmm. And I remember, towards the end of flight school, they threw up this list. Okay, we're going to go off the list. Academically, it was a combination of your fitness scores and all your tests and your flight performance. And they initially threw up an assignment to Hawaii. I was like, okay, I'll go fly helicopters in Hawaii. I was talking to my Ohio girl at the time that I'd met the summer before. We were getting more involved. It was a long distance relationship, but I'm like, hey, if I go to Hawaii, would you be good with that? She's like, yeah, of course. She's like, I'll leave Northeast Ohio and follow you to Hawaii and see what happens. But that assignment didn't pan out. So for 24 hours, I thought I was going to go to Hawaii. They came back the next day and said, you know what, that assignment actually isn't available. So they threw some stuff out there, and it was like Fort Campbell and Fort Hood. And then there was another one for Fort Lewis. So I'm like, you know what, I'll just go back to Fort Lewis. So, the night that I graduated flight school was the night we invaded Iraq in 2003. So you kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Wow. There's so many experiences that you had that are so entwined with
it's insane.
Wars.
It's very insane. So so March of 2003, put wings on my chest, went left Fort Rucker, Alabama, where the Army's flight school and all their warrant officer programs are at, and went back to Fort Lewis, signed in, and like, oh yeah, the unit that I was assigned to was the 54th Medical Company, which was at the time you had medevac companies, also known as dust-offs, so helicopters with the Red Cross on the side, attached to medical brigades, and then, they had been deployed to support the initial invasion in Iraq in 2003. So the unit that I just arrived to was, involved in the push from Kuwait into Iraq in 2003, and they were providing medical coverage, so, point of injury medevac coverage. So if somebody got hit by an IED, or you got somebody that was shot, and they call a medevac, helicopter comes in, picks them up, takes them back to a medical treatment facility. So I showed up, the whole unit's gone. There's a couple people in like the rear detachment. We don't know what's going to happen. We think you're just going to stay here. And I'm like, yeah, probably not. I'm like, just if you're going to send me, just let me know, and I'll go ahead and go. So they're like, yeah, as a matter of fact, we're going to send you to catch up with the unit. So showed up, signed in there, was sent to Fort Bliss, Texas to do an individual replacement where they train up individual augmentees to go over, because my unit was gone. There was nobody there to like get me up to speed with anything. Yeah. So did a quick in process, and then was turned and sent to Fort Bliss, and then from Fort Bliss sent overseas to Kuwait, and then Kuwait to Balad, Iraq, to catch the medical company that I was going to fly with as a brand new helicopter pilot. So the first time I touched a helicopter outside of flight school was in Iraq. Wow. So did that through the whole entire summer 2003, and kind of bounced around between Balad, Kirkuk, and Mosul with the medical company, and we didn't have a ton of work initially. We were kind of like a redundant unit. There were some other units in the area, so you had some overlapping coverage and some competing priorities. But I spent most of the summer 2003 in what we could say is more or less northern Iraq and Kirkuk, kind of the Kurdish area. Yeah. And just 2 helicopters on call. We were the only Army helicopter unit at the airbase in Kirkuk in 2003. And before the 101st is up there with their Apaches, but they eventually left, and just kind of provided medevac coverage up there, and then bounced back to Balad, where Balad was pretty bad because we were close to Baghdad. Okay. So we were just 911 call for medical coverage. It wasn't uncommon to get a call and go out and land on the road, with cars driving underneath the helicopter blades. But, if we got a call, it was because somebody was usually pretty badly hurt. So, but IEDs, convoys going down the road, that was always a bad thing. They would hit an IED and call us. We'd come in by ourselves. And the crazy thing at the time was medical evacuation helicopters, with Geneva Conventions. We didn't have defensive weapon systems. You had a 9mm pistol on you, and the
people you're fighting.
So you got a red cross on the side. Most people could care less, but kind of the mentality was we didn't care. Somebody's hurt, we're going to go out there and try to get them back to a hospital as soon as we could. And we picked up some pretty badly injured people, but it wasn't just U.S. forces. It was anybody, coalition or Iraqi, and we did that. And I still remember one incident. It was I want to say it was the UN had an embassy type operation in Baghdad that was blown up in the summer of 2003, and they pulled multiple medical evacuation helicopters over, and it was kind of free for all. There were people with all kinds of injuries. I still remember going down there and landing and picking up probably about a dozen people, a combination of American civilian employees working for the State Department and host nation, people with amputations to people with like rebar through their skull from this like suicide or vehicle-borne IED that went off. I think is what it was in December 2003. So, but I did that all the way until April of 2004, and was kind of on the wind down, realizing that okay, well, we're going to get replaced eventually, and fly back, and made it through the year in Iraq, and was going to get home and be just fine. And they just said, what, the unit that's going to replace us, that we're going to leave our helicopters here. They're going to come over and just fall in our helicopters because we got to keep resources here. And you guys are just going to fly C-130 back to Kuwait and then go home. So I was like, cool. So we were at an outstation. We flew back kind of to Balad where everybody was at, and there was myself, former Ranger guy with the Ranger tab. There was a guy named Dan McCants who would later get killed in a helicopter crash. But he was a former 1st Special Forces Group guy that I knew. He became a pilot too. Mm-hmm. And he was in the unit, and there was a couple other guys with Ranger tabs. And I still remember them saying, hey, we got to bring our vehicles back to Kuwait. So anybody with a Special Skills tab, guess what? You're going to ride a convoy back to Kuwait, and the rest of the company's going to fly back to Kuwait. Right. It's like, okay, great. So I made it through this whole entire year of, flying helicopters and stuff, and just to ride a convoy from Balad through probably the worst areas of Baghdad into Kuwait. So, my experience in the way leaving the country was spending 3 days in the back of a Humvee to get home. So. And with that, I remember arguing. We were a medical company, so all of us guys that were former, door kickers more or less in our past lives before we became pilots, had lobbied to get some kind of increased firepower to ride in the back.
Just your 9mm?
Yeah, just a 9mm. So at the 11th hour, they gave us a couple of just saw squad automatic guns that shoot 5.56 with a basic load of 600 rounds. And I still remember this kid that it was the driver of the Humvee that I was in with the executive officer. We built this like armored fortress in the back in like a fighting position. So I slept in the back of a Humvee for 3 days because we broke down a bunch of times too. And just driving through some of the worst areas in Baghdad to get home, and breaking down in the east or west side of Baghdad, kind of going towards some not so great areas. And we're just a medical company with a couple gun trucks from an infantry unit to escort us. But my ride out of country was in the back of that Humvee. And I made it to Kuwait, and kind of realized, you know what, this conventional like Army just isn't my thing. So started looking at after we made it home, and yeah, we got home in April of 2004, and a few months later, we're like, oh, you guys are going to go back in December. It's like, great. If I'm going to go continue to do this as a lifestyle and fly, I want to be, a part of special operations again and do that. So didn't think I had a chance. It was based on being a, very young pilot with only a few hundred hours, albeit, combat hours, but decided the summer of 2004 to put my packet into the 160th. And, thankfully they picked me up for an assessment. Now when you apply to go there, it's not a guarantee. You have to make the screening and the application. And then if you make the screening and the application, then you get to go do an assessment. And if you make the assessment, then you get to go train. And if you make it through the training, then you get to stay. But once you're there, then you have to make it through progression. So,
special operations.
Yeah. So which is great because, down the road, I think we crunched the numbers, through attrition, through screening, I would say that we hovered probably around the 30%, metric for people that actually made it into the green platoon there to train. So, a lot of people got cut in the application or didn't pass the assessment. But that's what I really wanted to do. And, in 2004, got married. So my wife really had no idea what she was getting into because we were only together for a few months married before I showed up or passed my assessment and showed up before Campbell, Kentucky, where we would spend, the next, 12 and a half, 13 years on the same unit before I retired. So her whole entire military experience really was, being more or less engaged to me and me surviving year in Iraq, right out of flight school to doing about 20 some odd separate trips to Afghanistan and other places over a period of time. So we did a lot of short, frequent deployments, but the 160th was an adventure, and got the opportunity to go assess for them in January 2005. Well, my old unit deployed, and admittedly, my motivator was, hey, if you don't make it through assessment, you can come join us in Iraq again for another 12 to 15 month deployment. And I still remember saying to the new commander, I'm like, hey, have a nice career, sir. Professionally, I wasn't disrespectful to him, but hey, thanks but no thanks. Have a good career, sir. I hope to see you around. And I think he realized at that point that I wasn't going to come back, and they would never see me in that unit again. So not that it was a horrible unit, but just wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of a high performing team. So because that's kind of the environment that I was raised in the Army. So
you go into the 160th, and you're learning to fly 4 different helicopters?
Going into the 160, that's almost like going through flight school again. Mm-hmm. So I think I actually flew more hours in the training program there in Green Platoon than I did in flight school for Rucker. So you do fly a couple different helicopters, but you're tracked for a specific helicopter. So I've started flying UH-60s, but they wanted me to go into MH-47s, which is the modified Special Operations Chinook. So I said, sure, I'll do that. That's fine. I just want to be part of the team here. So when you start, you make it through the assessment, which is a week-long process. That's kind of a nightmare, but it's they do everything from deprive you of sleep to do what we call more or less a murder board, where you have to do a presentation at the end to drowning you in a dunker, and you have to pass a swim test, to navigating without GPS in the helicopter, just doing fundamental time, distance, and heading to psychological screenings and interviews. And so you make it through that, and, they're really looking for your potential. So, do you have the potential to excel in the unit? It's not, will you pass? It's do you have the potential to do well, like long term? The most ideal thing is they get somebody that's a high performer that has the potential to stay in the organization indefinitely.
So they're going to put a lot of time.
They're going to put a lot of time and money into you. So that's kind of the special operations standard. You look at some of these other organizations. Why are people there for so long? Well, they get you in the door. They want you to stay because you want to be there with that team, and that's part of the magic of those organizations is having people that have worked together for so long. I mean, I flew with the same pilots for over a decade, and was raised with a lot of them. So, once you're there, you're super valuable because you have the skills and experience to do those missions. But started in 2005, made it through the assessment because they tracked me in Chinooks. They sent me right back down to Fort Rucker, Alabama, to get qualified in a conventional CH-47 Delta, which is an older version of the Chinook, just to learn how to fly it. So did that.
The Chinooks are the double.
Yeah, the tandem rotor. So kind of the workhorse of the Army. Not the biggest helicopter. CH-53 in the Marine Corps. The Air Force used to fly the MH-53. Is still a bigger helicopter, but the Chinook has some unique things that make him a little more capable up at higher altitudes. The tandem, the counter-rotating rotor system instead of a tail rotor. But yeah, I did that. Went down to Fort Rucker, got qualified in that. Came back, went through CRC at Fort Bragg. So the fun survival course. Survive, evade, resist, escape. Or survive, escape, resist, evade. I always get the acronym mixed up. But yeah, I went through Camp McCall at Fort Bragg. And
you're the third person I've had in here who's gone through that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was always like, people hype that course up, and it sucks, it's miserable. I'm like, well, just gonna go do it, and you're kind of off the grid for a few weeks. So I still remember the time that I went through is when Hurricane Katrina hit, New Orleans. So I knew nothing about that because I was in the course. I remember calling my wife, I think on a payphone, from Camp McCall out there, and she's like, "Oh yeah, like New Orleans got like leveled by a hurricane." I'm like, "Oh great, I had no idea."
Yeah.
But went through that, and the CRC course is probably one of the best courses I think I've ever been through. It sucks while you're in it, but when you go through the resistance training lab, the RTL, once it's over, you really like appreciate what you went through.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, it's sheer misery, but it's
sure.
In hindsight, it's I still think one of the best courses in the military. So
and
you go through that.
A lot of what you're going to go through is sheer misery if you want to get to the point where you're flying.
Oh yeah,
those helicopters.
Yeah, and at least I'm a couple of years removed from the Army now, so my acronyms are being replaced by VA acronyms. But yeah, the SEER course is great, and
loves that, for sure.
So does the VA too, though.
Yeah.
But now the SEER school, they do another SEER program too for all pilots down at Fort Rucker as well. So they're required to go through the CRC course too, which I think is great because the Air Force and the other branches send all their aircrew through some form of survival training. But yeah, I did that, and then started Green Platoon in the fall of 2005, and went through kind of the ground combat or ground skills or combat skills phase is what it's more appropriately called, and did that, and that's where you just go through, land navigation again, so just kind of the soldier skills, kind of fundamental like special operations skills. You go through some weapon stuff, medical, but a lot of it's you have kind of two different Green Platoon tracks. So you've got the enlisted Green Platoon, then you have the officer Green Platoon. The enlisted Green Platoon is a little bit longer, and it's more focused on the ground skills, and that's for all the MOSs. So, all of our maintenance kids or helicopter crew chiefs or medics or, administrative staff that were enlisted would go through that. And then the officers went through a similar but very unique track where we did some of those things, but we're going in as aviators, so we know that after we do the 4 or 5 week combat skills, you do mixed martial arts. So they have you do some just MMA, mixed martial arts fundamentals, kickboxing, boxing, normal like hand-to-hand combat stuff. That was really good. So you do that. I think combatives level 1 was a certification you got when you left that, and then you went into what was called BNAV, so your basic nav, and that's where you fly in a little bird, and you're just flying off of a map, time, distance, heading, no GPS. So you're being evaluated every single night, and you're working. That was probably the worst phase. I remember working 6 days a week, probably 18 hours a day, because you had to work some weekends, but you're planning and just briefing air missions every single night, and everybody goes out and flies and hits a couple targets, in the standard in the 160th is plus or minus 30 seconds. You can put a helicopter at point A, B, C, D, whatever to the X, landing on somebody's front door at exactly this time during this window. So we had a plus or minus 30-second window that we could guarantee a helicopter anywhere in the world. So I was like, yes, I want to be a part of that team.
Yeah, right.
But also when I was in Ranger Regiment, flew in the back of their helicopters all the time too. So I had a lot of respect for what they did. But you go through and you're flying just off of a map and no GPS, and you're learning how to train, associate, and just looking at your route planning and adjusting for winds and navigating off of terrain features or markers in the ground, roads, intersections, you name it. And you're taught how to navigate a helicopter by telling the other pilot who's flying it, who's an instructor, giving him corrections and monitoring your progress on a map, flying off of a paper map that you actually, off of a jog map that's I think 1 over 250, and you're able to, yes, I'm here, and hit all your checkpoints on time, and put a helicopter down without GPS within that window. So I remember being really intimidated by that, but towards the end of it, you become really, really, really good, and that kind of sets the tempo. And then after that, the basic nav, a month of doing that, then you start to go into the different phases of the helicopter that you're going to fly. So so basically from September until May, I was in the flying portion of the Green Platoon, and you go through Dunker training and all that stuff too, where they drown you.
Right. What is it, like a cockpit?
Yeah, we actually had there at Fort Campbell our own Dunker, so they had the cockpit replicated. It's all stainless, and it's a big, it's to scale, but again, that's great training, but people hate being drowned, but you got all your flight gear on, and they drop you in, strapped into the seat,
right,
flip you upside down, and then you have to, open your egress point and clear it, clear your harness or your seatbelt, come out and surface, and then they do a bunch of other drown proofing things.
But I'm guessing if you follow the directions that you're given, it's not
as
bad as it looks.
No, it's the instructors, they kind of tell you, what, just when the helicopter stops moving, you're upside down, just put your head back, let your sinus cavity fill with water, just suck it up, and just get comfortable doing that, and then get out and have your little HEEDS bottle, which is a compressed air bottle. And put that in your mouth, clear the regulator, and then get yourself out and just calm down. But they teach you how to be calm in the water. Right. And there have been cases where guys, have actually, because of that training, have actually, had like an engine failure and crashed in water, and helicopters sink, pretty much right away once they hit the water. Yeah. And there have been guys that have egressed, 30, 40, 50 feet down, and because of the training have survived, not without injury,
Sure.
But there are cases where guys off the East Coast of the Atlantic or around Fort Campbell have relied on that training to save their life. So yeah, it sucks, but
they do it, right?
Yeah, it's why you do it. You just get used to it. But I went through the Chinook MH-47 Echo course at the time. The first one of the earlier generations of the Special Operations Chinook, and did that, and then graduated in May of 2006, and less than a month later, was on my first deployment in Afghanistan in the summer of 2006.
So now you've been in both theaters.
Yes, I've been in both theaters, and did about 110-day deployment in Afghanistan in the summer of 2006, and was a brand new pilot there, so was a basic mission qualified pilot, and was in for a wild ride. We had a crew get shot down in southern Afghanistan in the summer of 2006. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a wild adventure.
Extortion 17. When did that? First of all, was that a Night Stalker pilot?
No, that's a big misnomer. That was actually a mixture of National Guard and Reserve crews, and I want to say they were based out of Kansas. I think it was Olathe, Kansas. But because there were so many, I guess to give you a metric, and it's surely been updated by now, but the kind of ballpark metric is that in the special operations community. Just for reference, black helicopters, 1/60th helicopters are black in color, are probably outnumbered by about 200 operators to one helicopter, if you think about it. So it's somewhere around there. There's more ground forces in Special Operations Command than there are helicopters to support them. So because of how things are aligned geographically in Afghanistan, there simply wasn't enough of our resources, and we were involved in some other theaters too, at the time. So we relied on what was called direct support rotary wing. So your conventional helicopters, from your conventional units or National Guard or Reserve units would kind of, fill the gaps, right, and would fly, SEALs or Rangers or, Delta guys or whoever else was over there when we couldn't support, or if we were allocated to higher priority missions, then they still wanted to go do missions in their respective area. Right. They'd have to rely on conventional support, and they were willing to accept that the capabilities weren't of the same pedigree, more or less. That's just the nature of it. They weren't they were flying a CH-47D. There's no glass cockpit. They didn't have all the sensors that we had to help us when you got into a situation. But that's it doesn't matter at this point. People lost their lives. But that was a conventional Chinook that got shot down and wiped out a whole entire team from Special SEALs, if you want to refer to them that way.
There were 17 of them or something like that?
Yeah, I guess there was more than that because they killed the whole crew as well. So I still remember that night because we were on a different mission just south of there, and I got pulled off that mission to go bring other resources up there to help with that. That was just a nightmare, of course, and just a lot of highly skilled, really good people across the board were lost that night. But yeah, that was a conventional helicopter. So, but yeah, my deployments for the 160 started in 2006, and we didn't, because we had so many competing priorities with training stateside and other obligations. We didn't do like year-long or months-long deployments. So I'd say our norm was to go for anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending, and just do that rotation. And when you weren't deployed, you were back training. When you weren't training, you were deployed. So it wasn't uncommon to do, 2 or 3 60-day deployments a year, every year.
Yes.
Yeah. I deployed in some capacity every year from 2006 until 2014, and then a little less frequently from 2014 until I retired. But that was all over the place, mostly in Afghanistan, but back to Iraq, of course, when that got busy again. And then we did a lot of exercises in Europe and some stuff in West Africa too. So, but
people don't even understand Africa. They don't even understand it's on the map.
Yeah, it's that was a decade ago. We were getting ready to go to Africa for a trip. People have been in and out of Africa since then, but that was an interesting experience to go to West Africa. I wouldn't go to some of those areas now just because the threat is so bad there.
Yeah.
There's some great people there, don't get me wrong, but the terrorism threat is just really, really bad there, and it's unfortunate. There's some beautiful areas there and some great people there, but that was a great experience too, spending time in Mali and Senegal. So yeah.
There's so many places that you'd love to visit.
Yeah.
That they've just become like I had a friend who was talking about going to Egypt, and I was like, I'd love to go to Egypt if I had a Delta Force platoon with me to just make sure I didn't have to keep my head on a
Yeah, it's just there's some beautiful parts of the world. Even Afghanistan is a beautiful country. It really is. It's just, you fly through some of those valleys, and there's so much history there. Just centuries of history. So many prominent historical figures have set foot in that country, and it really is a beautiful country. There's some beauty to the culture there, and it's just unfortunate that it's been more or less in conflict for hundreds of years, if you think about it. And
I read a great book about Alexander the Great, and the things he said about the country, whether it was about the people they were fighting or the countryside that they were looking at, you could have just taken it and put it with any general nowadays, and it was the same thing. They're just fighting the same people, the same sceneries, and it's all the same thousands of years ago.
Yeah, there's a book I've been reading off and on, ironically, after I got out of the military when I retired, but Tournament of Shadows. It's a really good book. It's like a phone book, but it talks about the British experience in the 1800s over there. It's kind of pushing through India with the East India Company, and a lot of it's kind of predicated on finding a certain breed of horse. But you go back even a few hundred years ago, it's basically the English Empire competing for dominance against Russian and Persian influence in the same area, and it's kind of the same narrative. It's kind of interesting, but so. It's I've never seen terrain like I've seen in that part of the world. It's just fascinating, the areas that are there and just how different it is when you go from south to north. It is just a breathtaking country, and going forward, I just hope that there's some degree of stability there, because you got to think there's kids there that have 18, 19 years old who know nothing but conflict, or really, if you think about it, people our age who know nothing but the Russian occupation, to the transition to the Taliban, to Bin Laden's influence. So it's just normalized. Probably same thing in Iraq to a degree as well. It's just that's all people know in conflict, which is unfortunate. That's why we tell my daughter, she's 10, be thankful for what we have here. That you're not living in a country that's conflict nonstop.
Yeah, you hear people talk all the time about America this, America that, but where else are you going? Oh yeah. That Reagan's speech about the shining light on the hill is for sure. If there's no America, there's nothing else. There's nowhere else to go. There's no more bastions of freedom without us.
Yeah, what I really enjoyed, just with traveling, spent some time in the Baltics too. So Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland, and a lot of time in Germany too. Is just people in foreign countries have a very good read on what's happening in this country too. I mean, they really pay attention to what's going on, and in some cases have a better idea of our politics or things we're involved with than most Americans do. So
I have a guy on the show all the time, Matt Damien, who is an expert in American politics.
Yeah.
He's from Sydney, Australia.
yeah, they're out there. I mean, I've talked to people in Germany, and I think one of the last trips, a couple trips ago in Germany, he was talking about the election and Trump and this, and how do you feel about this? What do you think? It's just they have a very good idea of what's going on with our politics, and they do pay a lot of attention to it. But if you look at like BBC News too, I mean they're pretty unbiased and have a pretty good read too. So it's fascinating when you go out there and talk to different people, different cultures.
Yeah, we got Aaron and I were in a bar in New Orleans and ran into a couple. Welsh couple.
Okay.
And they were just very interested in our thoughts on politics and Trump and everything else. And, Aaron and I could not be less interested.
Yeah.
in what's going on politically.
Yeah.
Insulate ourselves. So.
Yeah, people. You probably go through this too. How you're in the DOD and what do you think about this? I'm like, you know what? I don't care to talk about that right now. I'm here and this is what I'm doing now. I just remind people that any decision that's made affects, somebody in some capacity, regardless. It affects friends that I still have that are out there doing it still. I went to grad school and finished grad school in 2015 in Vermont at Norwich University, and have a graduate degree in more or less in international relations, but diplomacy. So I get that and have wrote a lot about stuff that's out there, about challenges in West Africa and fallout from the conflict in the former Yugoslavia, and people have marginalized history. I think more than anything, and that's not just domestically. I think globally, people tend to forget what happens now is I would not say always, but is generally dictated by things that had happened in the past, or there's still some leftovers from the past that influence how things happen today. And but I attribute some of that to history is not. I remember in school history being very prominent, academically in elementary school, and I don't think it is as much as it was when we went through. The focus is not quite there, but I think there's so much that is tethered to history that we tend to forget.
I was impressed with my son's history coming up. He's now in high school, but he got ancient civilizations and ancient history, which a lot of this stuff stems from. I mean, the Sunni Shia conflicts go back to Genghis Khan and before.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like this is a new situation we're stepping into. These are thousands of years old arguments.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, and you look at Sunni and Shia. That's nothing new. People forget the population breakdown of the Sunni and Shia population out there, and where they sit, and where they sit geographically, and you go back and look how borders were set, in Iraq, and some of those decisions I would argue probably set the tempo for conflict when they, when deciding borders, they segregated people that had normally worked and lived together. So it's it's just very frustrating. Afghanistan has those challenges too. We tend to focus on, well, how can we westernize them, or how can we do nation state building using the military, and how can we apply Western principles, or democracy to their culture, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work when you have a tribal based system. It just doesn't work for them. And
they're looking at it as this is another country when they don't necessarily look at it that way.
Yeah, it's just you have to, I think, especially for leaders in the military, you just really have to immerse yourself in some of the historical context of the areas that you're in to truly understand. And that's one thing I always did with my guys, was try to answer the why for them. Why are we here doing something? Why are we in West Africa doing this? Why are we in the Baltics doing this? And you really have to understand the history and how a lot of people still feel about the areas that they live in when you're over there doing, work with foreign militaries, or you're in areas. I think if you don't study up on some of that, or even some of the language too, for that matter. I remember going into Mali and learning, some basic phrases in Bambara, which is a local dialect, and then obviously trying to learn some French, former French, territory. And that paid huge dividends with some of the drivers that we had and just some of the people. That when you make an effort to learn about their culture and speak a little bit of their language, it just makes things so much easier because you're really always out there representing Americans and Westerners, and you always have a chance to change expectations because they have their expectation of who you are or who you could be just as much as you have an expectation or maybe preconceived notion of what they are or aren't. So
when I was in high school, we were coming towards the end of the Cold War, and they were offering Russian in school, so I started taking Russian, and then the Cold War ended, and it wasn't much use for it. But I tell you what, now when I'm in a restaurant and the waitress is a Russian, or I go to Target every day for coffee, and the barista's a Russian, and I can give her the very basic phrases that I have, and I made her cry the first day I said "Здравствуйте" to her, and she just looked at me and just started crying. She goes, "I haven't heard my language spoke to me in so long," and I said, "Well, I don't know much of it, so now I get a little lesson every time I go in there."
Let's say I did in Lithuania. I had a tendency with my guys to try to dress a little bit like the locals and blend in. So lots of Adidas if you're in Europe, of course.
Just like a soccer player.
Yeah, it's dressed like that. But I still remember we used to go when we were in Lithuania on a trip. We'd go to this grocery store in Kaunas. Kaunas is the central city, not the capital. Vilnius, Hunt for Red October fame. Vilnius is the capital. But we were staged out of the airport in Kaunas. This is 4 years ago now on a trip. And we would stop by this really nice grocery store every day and would have the same checkers. They were older, Lithuanian guys, men and women. And I started learning just the basic greetings of like, hello, how you doing? Yeah. And with the way I was dressed, they thought I was a local, and they would respond. And while the lady's scanning the groceries and everything and putting them in the bag for me, she's just chatting away in Lithuanian. It's like, oh, here's my euros. Okay, thanks, in Lithuanian. And I'm like, let's see, I'm on the team. I made it. But that just paid off, immensely. When you put the effort into to learn about some of the area, and my guys would get initially upset at me, like, hey, we got time, wake up early with me and let's go, because you're in these countries with history that is so much, more established than our own history. We've got 12th, 13th, 14th century castles. I'm like, we're going to go out and do some stuff before we got to work. And just go out into the village or whatever, and just go check out some of the cultural things over there. And those were like incredible experiences that I will never forget. The Hill of Crosses in Lithuania is a really beautiful place too. It's Lithuania. The Baltics are flat, very flat countries. Really no terrain. There's this little site that's called the Hill of Crosses. It's more like just like a little knoll, but there's probably over 5 million crucifixes that are placed in this hill. They're very Catholic in Lithuania. So they that's just infused in the culture over there is their Catholic faith. And went and saw some of those sites, and just like surreal experiences, kind of going off the beaten path in those countries too. So those are things I really enjoyed about my time, serving in the 160th, is going on some of those non-combat per se deployments, and you're living in hotels and stuff, and you're just kind of out with the people, and that was always probably the most enjoyable type of trip to have, is one of those trips. Even in West Africa too. I mean, we were living in hotels. Mind you, there's third world countries, but we still had the opportunity to go out with our drivers and experience some of the local scene and restaurants, and no, not so much of a safe place right now, but it was fun to go out there and kind of have my perceptions or other people's perceptions actually changed, realizing that it's there may be challenges in the country, but for the most part the people are just like us. They want to do the right thing and be successful and raise a family and work and be productive. So
they're not the majority of the people there, I'm sure, are not jihadists.
No, it's it's fascinating because most people are on the same plane, just being decent people. It's we have more in common with most people than we probably would not. I don't know. I guess my point I'm making is be willing to go out and experience things, and set your own perceptions, and don't let other people influence until you experience it.
Well, coming from a small town like you did, when I was, I tell people all the time that the best thing that ever happened to me was I became a professional Highland Games athlete, where I got to go to all these places I never would have gone to being a kid from Amherst. So now I got away from all my friends who, had their set in stone philosophies on life, and I got to see, Austin, Texas, and Portland, Oregon, and Iceland, and it's like, wow, there's a whole
It
different
is a
world
beautiful
out there.
world. Yeah, there's a lot of incredible stuff out there. I mean, we get sucked down the rabbit hole of conflict and being focused on all the stuff that's in the news. But that's my goal. With like I said, my daughter's 10. My goal with her is before she graduates high school is at least to hit 3 or 4 countries. I have this like goal in my mind of, hey, we're going to study the language of, like, I don't know, Norway for a year, and then we're going to go to Norway, and then we're going to pick another country, Spain. You're going to study Spanish for a year and go do it, because there's nothing that can replace just traveling and being in those places and experiencing the culture for yourself. So
education she could get.
yeah, so it's that's a goal going forward.
I love it. Yeah, go up to Norway, see the fjords.
Yeah, so it's travel all over the world. If I could do anything, and there were no constraints on me, time or money, I would just travel. That's
sure.
There's so much stuff out there I'd love to go see. So I think most people would probably do that.
Yeah, that's our favorite thing. We every year, Aaron and I, we don't do birthday gifts or Christmas gifts, maybe $20 or something, but we just put that money
experience.
Away and just go places.
Yeah, you can't put a price in experience, but yeah. So yeah, we're talking about the 160th, right?
Yeah,
I think we digressed enough. No, I'm fine with it. It was a great experience. I mean, I was a senior flight instructor there, and just progressed really quickly. I mean, a decade ago, I took a flight lead ride. A decade ago, this upcoming November, and was able to just really, at 30 years old, start to influence like my own team and the culture there, and kind of build my own team, because I was the in-between age. I had the guys that raised me were 10 to 15 years older than me, but my guys that I was raising were 5 to 10 years in some cases younger than me. Yeah. So I knew how to capitalize on the institutional knowledge of the guys that were older than me, but also shape things in a way that was easily received by the younger guys that I was trying to raise, because myself and the younger guys I was raising there were tech savvy, video game generation, more or less. The older guys were not so in tune with that. So, but it was just a great experience. I mean, it was a difficult experience, especially for my wife. Just the constant deployments and being on alerts and having to go away.
But going on missions that were, you were going on missions.
Yeah, I mean, it's
high stress, high.
I mean, some
value targets.
Sometimes you got to call on the weekend, like, hey, you got to be back at work in 2 hours, and you show up and you call back home, hey, pack this, and this for me. I'm going to be away for a little while, and then you go and you just disappear. So I had a Christmas ruined in 2009 or 2010 because of that, and also had people wanting to deploy me 2 weeks after my daughter was born. My wife had a C-section, so was able to fight that one off for another month. But yeah, doing 3 or 4 deployments a year, it's just it was busy, and it will continue to be busy for those guys that are still doing it. Yeah. But the experience there, I mean, I wouldn't have traded it for anything, and quite honestly, even despite losing really good friends, to crashes or accidents or mishaps or combat, it really set me up for success and a really smooth transition out of the military, I think. Now, not everybody has a smooth transition, but the soft skills developed there, what I called the outside the cockpit skills, because I enjoyed flying, but I wanted to get into something completely different. And I've not flown since I retired. I may fly again someday. I'd like to at least share that with my daughter and someday my wife. But I kind of people ask me all the time, why don't you go fly for Cleveland Clinic or whatever, or Metro Life Flight? And I'm like, well, not to take away from what they do, but I just, it's Derek Jeter, when he left the Yankees, didn't go and play church league softball. It's like, once you hang it up, then just hang it up.
Watching these videos.
Yeah, you can't replicate it.
Going nose up in the air and dropping onto buildings. These guys are fast roping down. It looks like they're dropping 10 feet or so.
Oh, yeah, it's, arguably the best aviation organization in the world, just because of the standards that are there and the capabilities. And it's just a really great team, and I will always advocate for the unit, and my loyalties will be with that unit because that's where I spent most of my time. But just the ethos there and the motto, and just the willingness that people have to support the mission and take care of each other. I mean, it's more than a fraternity. It really is. And there were guys that were there that retired within the last 5 or 6 years that had been with the unit since serving in Somalia in '93. Guys that did 20 plus years flying, little birds. Now, they were there forever.
Black Hawk Down, were those Night Stalker pilots?
Yeah, those were Night Stalkers. Obviously, I was a shoot down, and there were some fatalities there, and of course the movie with the same namesake. But like Mike Durant, he's still out there working in the defense industry more or less, so he survived that.
Yeah.
But there are guys that flew in that mission that served up until a few years ago and retired.
Wow.
They were with the 160th for over 20 years, flying Little Bird. So with special operations, that was one of the unique isms is that you could stay with the same unit unless you wanted to leave. So I was in the same battalion, the 2nd Battalion, 160th, down at Fort Campbell from essentially 2006 until 2018. With the same group of people, minus the people that came and went. But the core, the core of the warrant officers that I was with, most of them are still there.
It's got to be hard to leave those guys.
Yeah, that's people ask me, do you miss flying? I'm like, yeah, I do from time to time. Not a day like today when the weather's bad and I'm trying to land and find the ground. Helicopters and ice don't mix, but I miss the people. I mean, it's you're with high performers, really just great people, and I have some incredible friends there that I'll have for a lifetime that are still there. So yeah, I mean I miss those people and those relationships because that's difficult to reproduce or replicate, outside of the military, because you don't. No matter what you do, it's difficult to share an experience. What I would call them, just those really super high stress, complex, kind of life or death. If you don't make a decision, something bad happens to you or something bad happens to the people you're supporting. To survive those experiences or be, around those people when you're making those really critical, stressful decisions and then surviving it. I mean, you can't replicate that in most places.
You can't explain it.
Yeah, that camaraderie you have with people. It's like, okay, well, we survived another rotation of really crazy stuff, getting shot at almost every night and walking away unscathed. We lived, so it's we'll go do it again and again and again. So
let's do it tomorrow.
Yeah, let's do it again the next night. And being able to go through those spikes of stressful spikes and then the decompression and having fun and it's something more than a fraternity and brotherhood. I would argue. So it's a special place. It's a special place.
Want to do civilian piloting now, though.
After watching the video. I say I'm not marginalizing what the brave crews do that fly life flight and stuff, but I just after flying that way, if I couldn't do it that way, I wouldn't want to do it anymore.
Sure, yeah.
So it's kind of like I went out on top, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
It's time to write a new book.
Like a Delta Force guy going to suddenly be a small town cop.
Just doesn't work. No, you'll never find what you're looking for. I would argue. So you just can't replicate that. So I think it's good for you to move on. I don't even say start a new chapter. That's a book. That book is closed. There's so much there that those are more than chapters.
What exactly are you doing now? I mean, we met because your wife has gone through a couple of your talks at the VA. Yeah,
so I in the fall of 2017, I always knew I was going to retire. I mean, I progressed very quickly. I mean, in 2014 was promoted to Chief Warrant Officer 4, so even if I stuck around, I would have just been boarded for Chief Warrant Officer 5, and that's the rank cap for warrant officers. So I mean, to be at the time 38 years old, retiring as a CW4, having also, promoted quickly when I was in Ranger Regiment, having done all those things, I'm like, what, I've far exceeded my own expectations and any expectations that anybody probably had of me growing up. So I felt accomplished. So the first thing, with me was, I got a young daughter, it's a super stressful occupation. I've done some incredible stuff that I'm very proud of. Accomplished far more than I ever thought I would in the military. I'm like, I'm going to go out while I'm on top, and I want to do something completely different. So a new challenge. So probably about the summer of 2017 into the fall, we really focused on where do we want to live. And like I said, both my wife's parents, they were divorced, but they had passed. My mother-in-law died in 2016. My father-in-law passed away actually while I was on a deployment to Iraq in 2017. And coming back to Northeast Ohio for her was kind of off limits initially, especially with her mom. I mean, her mom was my mom. She was just a little Sicilian lady from Brooklyn who moved to Cleveland. It sounded like she still lived in Brooklyn and just an incredible person. And without her being up here, that was just a gap that could never be replaced. So, but my wife still had family up here. And we decided first, we really like Cleveland. In Cleveland, we're not going to go to California. My parents had left California. They actually moved to Nashville, which is pretty close to where I used to be stationed. We told them, hey, don't move out here for us. We're not staying. Yeah. But they got out of California, and they're in a better spot in Nashville. And really have no family in California anymore. But we decided, hey, let's focus on where we want to live. What area is going to give us what we want? The job, we'll figure the job out later. And decided, hey, you know what? We want to come back up here. It offers what we want, the environment that we want to raise our daughter in. All the amenities and things to do. And once we nailed that down, then I got into some external nonprofit transition programs kind of tailored for transitioning or retiring special operations people. So Commit Foundation, a great organization, and kind of all inclusive. And they kind of set the course for me to really focus on my transition. The transition assistance programs in the military, the formal ones are okay. They're not great, but there is a market for nonprofits to help people out. And I took advantage of one of those programs, and really put me on the right path. So I decided, you know what, if I'm going to go to Northeast Ohio, I'm going to start connecting with people. So I got really busy on LinkedIn and made the connections up here to certain people, and just got, one person introduced me to their network, to that person's network, and, just kind of, amplified and got, in with the right people, and was talking to a bunch of different companies. But a person who's now a great friend of mine who is up here, who lives on the west side, and he's a naval reservist. Him and another former Army Ranger and some other people up here, former Coast Guard, Coastie, a really good military network up here. They introduced me to some people at the VA. So while I was also talking to other corporations and organizations up here, I got introduced to the VA. And excuse me, with the VA, it was immediately evident to me that the culture was about the patient. It wasn't about bottom line. It wasn't about throughput. It wasn't about making money. It was about, we have patients, they're veterans, we're going to take care of them, we're going to do whatever it takes. And I was very adamantly opposed to going into the defense industry. The money was there, but I just wanted to step away and do something completely different. So of all the places, all the awesome places that I went and met other executives and staff with, and consulting, great people, great organizations, I couldn't pass an opportunity up to get a shot at the VA, a nice entry point. So went ahead and took the offer on that, and we moved up here in June and July of 2018. And I actually retired, had my retirement ceremony in June of 2018, and then I had banked on my leave time, so I took the whole summer off while also getting paid by the Army.
Awesome.
And was retired on October 1st of 2018, but I'd already started with the VA in August of 2018. So got hired onto the front office staff, and just kind of did, project management, program analysis. We opened 2 hybrid operating rooms recently, so we can do TAVR procedures, so artificial valve replacements, minimally invasive, so some advanced vascular and cardiothoracic procedures. So got pulled onto that project to help the surgical team activate those rooms about a year ago. Did that. The Fisher House, we opened two Fisher House buildings just up the street from the VA.
We actually had a charity event one time where we donated money to them.
Yeah, great organization. So Fisher Foundation's great, and Cleveland finally got to 2 Fisher Houses up the street from the hospital, so got involved in the project with that. Did some other stuff throughout the hospital, and then got an opportunity to go into supply chain with logistics. So back in November, December, transitioned from the front office to be the assistant chief of logistics. So
you're enjoying it?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was exactly what I was looking for, and I've got over 100 employees and a big budget, and we handle everything, medical supply, logistics, contracting that goes through the hospital to support the various services. So even errand service with infusion, all the clinics we provide. We're the mechanism that gets them what they need for medical supply and logistics. So I'm
always amazed because the VA gets such a bad rap.
I get all my health care at the VA.
Yeah.
So,
but every person I've met through Aaron, because it's the only way I meet people who work at the VA.
Excuse me.
I have never met anyone who isn't mission driven.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you go work at Cleveland Clinic or UH or something like that. But especially here in Cleveland, they're mission driven.
Oh yeah.
They have an uncle or a grandfather who was a vet, and that's why they're there working. And I think people just need to understand that, and maybe a lot of the veterans that I talk to who are anti-VA, And then you ask them, are you using your benefits? No, I've never used my benefits.
Yeah, and I've talked about this publicly too. That the problem is not so much. It's not with the VA. It's they lack information when they separate from the military. So, you soldier, sailor, airman, marine, whatever. They're going to separate. To put it into context, use me as an example. I probably have 4 or 5 cumulative years of training, millions of dollars worth of training and time invested in me, right, to get me to where I was able to perform my job and, Ranger Regiment, the 160th, and everywhere else. And that's over the course of a 20-year career. But on the way out, the mandatory transition time that I had to go do, just focused on transitioning out of the military, was 5.5 business days. So you don't know what you don't know. And, there are a lot of people out there that have had bad experiences, with the VA or negative experiences. But a lot of that I attribute us to just they lack the information on the benefits that are available to them. So, on the DoD side, it's just, hey, this is the VA.
Yeah.
So the average person that's getting out probably disassociates healthcare with, their other benefits. So their post-11 GI Bill, a VA home loan, the other benefits that are out there, and, good, bad, or indifferent, they go after those benefits first that they're entitled for, not realizing that they have incredible benefits with VA healthcare now. Like I said, my opinions today represent my opinions, not the institution.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm an employee at the VA, so but I also get my healthcare at the VA, and I've not had a negative experience there. And I will tell you that as compared to Army medicine, it's far superior. It really is. And everybody, knowing that I'm also an employee there, is not treating me any differently. So people have negative experiences everywhere, but the VA really focuses on taking care of the veteran and making it better. And there are just incredible resources that the VA at large, not excluding healthcare, offers. I mean, I am using every dollar of my post-11 GI Bill for a second graduate degree right now that I'm almost done with. So I've used VA home loans. So you don't.
What's the new degree?
This one's Project Management and Organizational Leadership, Northeastern University in Boston. So another online program, but I've been slow rolling this one, just kind of on my own pace. But you don't know what you don't know. So people get out and they get a lot of hearsay from people that think they know the rules and regulations and what the VA is all about, or they have incorrect information, and it just kind of diffuses. And the best thing to do, for anybody, is just to go talk to the staff of the VA, talk to the veteran service organizations, and get factual information, and then go from there. I mean, I
can't tell you how many times I've sent people, Erin's phone number, text her, ask her these questions, and they had no idea.
It's a great organization, and like I said, I chose to work there because of the mission. I really wanted to be a part of a team that has a mission every single day. When you go to work, the mission is to take care of the veteran, and have the unique perspective of being both an employee and a patient. But Cleveland's a great place. We got a good hospital, good staff, and nobody's perfect, but we sure try to be. And there's so many resources out there. So I would encourage people to just get smart on the facts and talk to the right people, because there's a whole world of resources out there, especially with women veterans. That's per capita, that's our fastest growing population right now. And then my generation is a different generation. We're really heavy in Vietnam vets still. It's our biggest population. But every generation associated with the conflict has unique challenges. But why would you go anywhere else? And the VA is the best for a lot of those illnesses or ailments that are out there. Plus, we do some incredible research too. It's fascinating.
Where else are you going to get research on improvised explosive device injuries?
Or even PTSD. There's a lot of veterans that have worked there that have served in combat, so they get it. It's when you have people that are also veterans that work there, they tend to understand what you're going through, or they've gone through it themselves too. So it's a great organization. I couldn't pass the opportunity up to do that, and it's been good to me so far, and I enjoy the challenge every single day. And it's my supply chain team is a good team. And every day I just kind of show up with a growth mindset and learn something new every single day. So it's fun.
Weight belt mentality. You're just going to learn something.
Got to. I mean, it's if you don't, then you're just cheating yourself. But I think even that presentation I gave to Erin and all the other nursing leadership, it's you have to show up willing to learn something every day. Regardless of the experience level of the people around you. If you're a 30-year, senior nurse manager at the VA, well, you can still probably learn something from a, 25-year-old brand new nurse who has a different background.
I think it's a great lesson for everyone in every walk of life. Just be willing to put your ego aside a little bit.
You have to.
Something.
Yeah, you have to.
Every day.
Because you can't, even when I was in the 160, we had guys that were really tech savvy or self-taught and a lot of stuff too. And instead of trying to focus on everybody's weaknesses, I mean, we had our baseline standards, and flying the helicopters and some of the other skills we did, but sometimes you needed people to have skills that are above and beyond. Yeah. And if you have people with those skills, then capitalize on them and use them. Focus on the weaknesses later. But we never had time for that. So, but yeah, you had to use your team to the top of their scope at all times. Yeah. Because we were always out there kind of on our own, sometimes setting networks up on our own and, being able to plug in, to the matrix so we could do our job. Yeah. But we're often relying on people that weren't, didn't have the background to do a lot of those skills formally, but knew enough to get things moving. So you just had to, when you're a lean, agile institution like we were in the 160th, and sometimes in remote places, well, you have to capitalize on the skills and strengths of the team.
And you're high performers.
High performers. So, use them.
Get the job done.
Yeah. So it's I enjoyed it. The VA's been good to me. I can't complain. Northeast Ohio's been good to us so far. So
well, I'm glad you're here. I want to thank you for coming out today.
Yeah.
I'd love to do this again sometime.
Of course.
Talk a little history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go from there, but. Yeah, thanks for coming out.
No, it's great. You guys got a great setup here, and I suppose we'll have to get another one of the books to talk about Highland Games. I've been to the Highland Games once down in Nashville, and I do have some Scottish blood, so I think I would be shaming my Scottish heritage if I didn't get involved in some capacity. So
you come to the right place.
Yeah, so it's
look that up.
Yeah, so but no, it's my pleasure, and appreciate what you guys do out here, and support for. Military and everybody else. You guys run a great organization out here.
We appreciate what you do and did and are doing now with the VA. And this has been great. I want to thank you one more time.
Absolutely.
And,
let's do it again.
All right. This has been The Refined Savage. See ya.